Good morning, everybody. It's super exciting to have you all here. Thank you so much for what is our inaugural of our digital health virtual office hours. And just so everybody knows who I am, my name is Russell Benaroya. And I think first and foremost, you need to know that I am a former digital health entrepreneur. I started a company called Every Move in 2011, funded by Sandbox Industries and a number of Blue Cross plans. We were selling into the health insurance industry, and I have been there. So I am your peer. We are on this journey together. Today, however, I am the owner of Stride, and Stride is a fully managed back office accounting and HR services company tailored toward working with digital health companies. And what's kind of interesting is that my partners and I are all ex-digital health entrepreneurs who came together with one commitment. And that commitment was to eliminate the distractions that keep us as digital health entrepreneurs by focusing on what matters most. And what matters most is driving your innovation to change the world. Now, we know that back office is more than just accounting and HR. Oh, if you could put your phone on mute a little bit, there's a lot of background noise. But we know that back office is more than just accounting and HR, and there are actually a lot of areas of compliance, including legal and technology. And so today, rather than spending time talking about all the work that Stride does on the back office, we wanted to bring a very unique component of compliance to the table, something that both creates opportunity for us as entrepreneurs, but also instills a little bit of fear as entrepreneurs, like, oh, I could go to jail if I don't follow this rule or something like that. And that feels a little bit freaky for entrepreneurs that just wanted to get into this business to make an impact and make a mark. So with that said, I am super excited and pleased to have Steven Klein and Tianveer Panjwani from CommonGoodIT on the call today. And one of their colleagues, Joseph Macedo, is going to be visiting at the end. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but CommonGoodIT is a fully managed outsourced IT firm that has a tremendous amount of experience in security in healthcare specifically. We only have an hour today, so I want to be super efficient. A couple of things to know. One, I am recording this and it will be available later. Awesome. Number two, feel free to interrupt me or maybe interrupt Steven at any time. Well, maybe I'll let Steven say if you can interrupt him. Third, let's have a ton of fun around this and learn together. Listen, we're all just a group of people trying to make a mark and figure out how to wade through this morass together. And with that, I would say let's rock and roll. Maybe if you're not speaking or asking a question, maybe put your phone on mute just to create a little bit of a lack of distraction. But with that, let's rock and roll. Steven Klein, everybody, and Tianveer.
Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today?
Awesome. Can I get like an awesome?
Thanks.
Okay, great.
Ask when everyone's on mute.
I know, I realized that as the words left my mouth.
Yeah.
So let me introduce my company for a moment, if I can, please. CommonGoodIT is an almost 20-year-old, fully managed services company. As Russell shared, we've got a great deal of experience, both in depth and breadth, in helping with digital medical, in managing information technology. So I'm the CEO, I'm the guy on the left. Tianveer is the gentleman on the right, and one of our associates who's got pulled into a different call will be joining us a little bit later. His name is Joe. Couple things about the presentation today. I'm not one of those people who's going to read the slides to you. I'm probably going to speak extemporaneously during it, and you can feel free to interrupt at any time and let me know if you have any specific questions. Before I jump in, did I hear somebody asking a question? Okay, all right, let's jump in. So, 2018. It was a banner year if you were a state district attorney or a federal attorney, because more than $25 million, I feel like Dr. Evil when I say that, was levied out in fines. 5 people were fitted for orange jumpsuits, and the government agencies, the state's attorney generals, the federal attorney generals, are excited about this because they're seeing HIPAA compliance as low-hanging fruit and an opportunity to pad their coffers. It has been outlined to be an area of focus, and so this puts pressure on all of us to be on the top of our game and to have our house in order. Who has seen something like this before? Show of hands. There we go. I'm guessing some others of you have seen these as well. The important thing to understand about these kind of documents and about the other things that we're going to talk about today is that it's incredibly important to be scrupulous and to document everything correctly, because one wrong word, one incorrect piece of information, one fudge factor can have seriously deleterious consequences. It's our job to keep that from happening. And so I'm going to share some of the tips and tricks that we do to keep that from happening for you. We have a client who has been with us for a better part of a decade now, and they're fairly notorious for fudge factor. And you know, we can jump up and down and say, look, you're at risk for this, you're at risk for this. But at the end of the day, the responsibility is on, in that case, the CEO of that company, because she is stating that and signing a line, yes, all these things are true.
Yes, yes, that's clear.
We've got another group that, you know, we helped through an audit, and luckily their house was completely scrupulously in order, and they sailed through it without a problem.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we want to do.
Yeah, and that's really the opportunity here. The opportunity is to have an understanding that this is handled. Your HIPAA compliance is handled. All the different pieces of it, all the different pieces of the anatomy, the systems, the people, the processes, that you have a third party who guarantees their work, who can sit down with you and run through all these different permutations so that our clients can therefore thrive, can therefore excel at their business and grow and make deals and work on things that give them joy and give them excitement, rather than having to deal with the downside of spending weeks and months on something which still might come back and bite them in the bottom.
But also without incurring a crap ton of overhead in order to do it, right? Because most of us are, you know, relatively thinly capitalized. So we need to be able to do this without feeling like we're going to have to allocate a huge budget. Ideally, you'll let us know.
Oh, yeah, actually, that's a really good point, because this service that we provide is far less expensive than bringing in, you know, say a HIPAA compliance officer.
Sure.
Somebody with, you know, with a background and experience with this. It's fractions of what somebody would pay for a chief technical officer who's responsible for this, or a chief security officer. It's, you know, 5 pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a fully managed service. So it's, you set it and forget it. And you have somebody else who guarantees the work. So like I said, I'm going to jump back in onto the presentation now. I'm not going to read these to you. I trust that all of us have gotten here because we can read. A couple pieces that I do want to bring to your attention, though, is that the right equipment for the job matters. It's an area where we come in and we see a lot of clients maybe not fully following through with best practices. Perhaps they've got a decent firewall in place, but the firmware is several versions out of date. Or their chief executive officer is VPNing in, and he has a $25 router that he bought at Walmart. That operates as a security risk. That's a vector of attack. And that's an area where a lot of people don't recognize that this is a place where they have to be more careful. It's easy, like you said, to want to save money. Nobody likes spending money. I mean, it's easy to want to save money on this, but spending $300 for a basic business quality firewall is an easy investment to maintain a more secure environment. The other piece that I want to bring everyone's attention to is encryption. Even 2 years ago, 128-bit encryption was the thing that everybody was fine with. Now it's harder to crack 256-bit ciphers, and your data has to be encrypted at every single step of the way. If you have data, it has to be encrypted. If it moves from your app into your database, that has to be encrypted. If it's passing across your network, it has to be encrypted. These best reasonable safeguards are in place because these organizations need to understand, your organizations need to understand that it's a constantly changing target, and evolution within your organization needs to continue to happen to meet these security needs.
Mm-hmm.
So the next piece of this custody is people. Now for myself, I personally find systems are easier to manage than people. I'm curious to see who would agree with that one.
Yes, no people. Did I just say that? Sorry.
Yeah. Computers, they generally do what I want them to do.
Mm-hmm.
With your people, the most important thing to remember here is that they understand what's at risk for them. I'm talking about your customer service person who's sitting on the floor. I'm talking about your outsourced bookkeeper. Every place, any place where people touch PHI, they need to understand their levels of responsibilities with that. This is information that we cover during quarterly trainings. This is information that they need to sign off on and document that they understand each of these safeguards are in place. And document is kind of the key word here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there a system? Is there a like a software as a service that hosts the training and the auditing of that training that you guys like to use?
We don't have an SAS for that.
Okay.
Yeah, we've developed our own protocols and systems for that.
Okay.
So we'll say to our clients, okay, look, we're going to store your 6 years of documentation on this file in this directory.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to help you make sure that it's locked down from a security perspective. And we're also going to set up a best practice so that we do test restores of this information periodically. Mm-hmm. So that, you know, we've got this document, which again, like the computer systems themselves, is a living, breathing document. It needs to be continuously updated. What you can't do is recycle your documentation from last year. It has to be recreated every year. Yes, you can pull so much of the information in there, but you can't just say, okay, this is my 2019 report, and it's the same thing as my 2018 report.
Okay.
All right. I want to touch on BAAs. That's an area of vulnerability that we notice a great deal. Sure, you have your BAAs with your developers. You've got your BAAs with your hosting company. One area of vulnerability that we find a great deal, excuse me, is that BAAs don't exist in places where they could. And it's best available opportunity to do this. So how many of you have a BAA with your accountant? Or the person who's developing your marketing website? And many of you might be thinking, well, gosh, I don't need a BAA for my web designer. He doesn't see any of my PHI. Well, what if you're doing a screen share with your web designer and you say, hey, I want to make a tweak to this section of my website. On your other screen, you have your programs open where all that PHI is there to be seen. That's a breach. That has to be documented. And your web designer is now in a position where they can hold you accountable. So a piece of advice that we provide is, if you're working with an external vendor, if you're working with a cleaning service, have them sign a BAA, because your cleaning service can come in at night, somebody left their computer running, maybe they're VPNing in and they're operating their computer remotely. There's all the data right there. And the cleaning service has access to all of your patient data. So bottom line is, be as conservative as you can possibly be. And then if more information needs to be granted, you can grant that information, even if it happens by accident. Questions so far?
Yeah, so I'm just curious, like, you sign a BAA with the company, and how do we enforce the BAA on a personal level?
Can you give me an example?
So custodials, for example, we sign a BAA with the custodial company, and an individual who comes in and probably have no idea what BAA.
That's a great question. I think it kind of falls into the same realm that other contracts would be. I mean, the burden of responsibility. I'm not an attorney, but I believe that the burden of responsibility for complying with the agreement would land in the lap of the organization that's signing the BAA. They're stating that if they have access to this information, that they have certain protocols that they have to follow. Even if it's just in the BAA with your cleaning staff, if it says, hey, if you see information on the computer, you're responsible for not recording it in any fashion. Obviously we want to, they're going to have less access to something than, say, your developer would be, because he's going to be able to parse your base and grab all the information. They have to be tailored and reasonable.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, great, thank you.
Okay, check this one out. So we were using SendGrid for our automated emails, right? You know SendGrid?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we were using SendGrid, and the insurance company was asking us to have SendGrid fill out their HIPAA IT security questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't enough to just sign a BAA. They actually wanted to put our vendors through a security review. Is that normal? What's your experience? And how? And basically, we had a vendor that was like, guys, this is we can't agree to some of this. I'm curious if you could make a comment on it. It was difficult for us.
Tanvir, what's your experience been around that? Particularly I'm thinking with HCS.
Yeah, so actually we have Joe on the call. He would probably be a better person to answer that question.
Yeah, happy to jump in, guys. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So there's something that the business associate needs to, or the covered entity, in this case, to their vendors. There's actually something called technical due diligence, which in most cases it's required that they would actually have to do more than just a BAA. So they have to reach out to their vendors and actually get them. Now, it's not a full analysis like you guys had originally stated. It is something, there's no specific questions by the government that they say you have to use, but you have to check out your vendor's security protocols. Now, obviously, the best way to do it is a security assessment, but you're okay sending them, let's say, a questionnaire on some of their security protocols. But you do have to check that. That's in addition to the BAA. And we find sometimes that a lot of organizations don't fulfill that portion of it. So that's actually part of it. Not all the time it's required, but a lot of the time it is. So due diligence is very important as well.
Hey, this is Brent Poole speaking. I've got a quick question, and maybe to you, Joseph. It sounds like you've had
Rates and BAA, so you have to be very careful what you're signing. I mean, we'd always give you a very good one. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure, I mean, somebody like AWS, I don't think they're looking to skirt any issues, but the idea you should have one of your own that actually you're determining the liability on your terms, if that makes sense. But at the end of the day, they should have a really good one at AWS. But yes, they do have to sign one. As long as they're signing one, that's all that you're concerned about. But they do and are legally required to sign one.
And Brent, AWS did give us their SOC 2 compliance audit. as part of our diligence.
Oh, that's great to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had really good luck with AWS in the compliance world. They're pretty eager to get that business.
Can I ask a follow-up question to the idea of getting BAAs on your cleaning staff? I'm troubled that that would be a very challenging thing to actually accomplish, given that you are then assigning liability, significant liability, to the cleaning staff. I mean, I carry insurance, errors and omissions and breach insurance to cover myself in case anything goes bad. Then that would seem to imply that all of a sudden my cleaning people or vaguely associated folks are going to have to do the same thing. Why wouldn't I just make sure that my own processes were good so that I wouldn't expose the cleaning people to the data in the first place?
I think my answer to that is you should be doing that anyway, and stuff happens. And so if there's a mistake, if you have an employee who's using remote access software and his monitor is on and they're having information coming across the screen, then that's an opportunity for potential breach. If you're 100% confident that your internal processes are strong enough to keep something like that from happening, then maybe you don't need to ask your cleaning staff to do something of that nature.
Yeah, but how would I get my cleaning staff to actually sign this document? I don't see why they would do it.
I've not run into problems with that.
They just sign?
Yeah,
take on the liability?
Yeah, most of the time they're going to sign, guys. I mean, we don't see that as an issue. So what happens is, depending on the type of business associate and their direct access to that PHI, sometimes you see different language in that BAAs. Now, we'll still consider it a BAA, but you'll see less stringent protocols on something like that, where it's more of a business relationship. It's teetering on the fence of being an actual BA, but just on your own safeguards, you should get them to sign a BAA. But at the end of the day, if they don't, there's some type of agreement that definitely needs to be signed. But your best effort is to get them to sign a BAA.
Thanks,
Hi.
Joseph. Yeah, I would agree with that. And if you've got a professional level cleaning staff, I mean, they're going to have people print documents and leave them on their desk. Machines are easier to manage in my world, and people operate outside of what they should be operating outside of. This is about covering your own backside with this.
Hi, so this is Chooks from Pilsey. I've got a question here concerning cloud-based. So companies who are basically using more of the cloud-based systems, do you have any experience with some of the processes that you've seen these companies putting? Talking specifically to the point you made earlier about using things like VPN software. Generally, if you have a VPN, you're VPNing into, say, like a company network. Mm-hmm. But if you operate mostly on the cloud, where most of the things you use are all SaaS based, where you're not really VPNing into anything per se, what has been your experience working with companies this way?
So, can you give me like an example? So, let's say that you're interfacing on the back end with your database-driven application that's being hosted on AWS. Are you referring to something like that?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, then it's generally more secure.
Okay.
Because the burden of responsibility shifts to AWS in a case like that. And it's at my house, I have locks on my doors, I have a dog, and I have a security system. All of those things are commonplace safeguards to make sure that me and my family are safe. So I would still advise you, if you're one of my clients, to make sure that you've got a robust firewall and that your systems are fully patched. and that your antivirus is up to date, and all of those things are in place. Additionally, you know, the security, the VPN, so to speak, the secure tunnel that's being established between you and your application layer and your database layer, you know, has to maintain those same high levels of encryption. So if your developer is building you something in 128-bit, that's not good enough. It has to be a higher level of encryption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Obviously a lot of the companies that I have seen and, you know, heard about in the past have been more traditional companies that have a lot of their stuff, you know, hosted locally. Mm-hmm. So having to maintain like an IT system with, you know, VPN, you know, obviously those are mandatory, but more or less for companies who are, you know, operating purely on the cloud. You know, that's really where my question was.
Right, but I mean, it's all one big puzzle, because if your computer itself is insecure, let's say that there's a keylogger or a screen capture virus on your computer.
Yeah.
You're interfacing with your AWS system, that's great, and your developer has a nice tight, you know, security protocol in place, that's great. But if the computer itself that you're running on is insecure, then that's where, you know, the opportunity for an attack vector is established.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer the question, Chucks?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I was just curious to know what, you know, other folks are doing. Being that, you know, a lot of the things people work on these days are all cloud-based, so.
Totally. Joe, do you have any other thoughts on this?
I would just say that obviously a lot of times organizations end up saying that because my security in the cloud, that I'm secure, and this might go back to the original point, that makes me compliant, or I'm dealing with all the protocols I have to deal with, and that's 100% false. So definitely to expand the horizon it's really about every individual company's plan. And I think a lot of people get confused thinking, hey, I'm using this stuff in the cloud, it's secure, I'm fine. But the government looks at it and says, well, you have issues, you could still lose a device, you could do this, you could do that, where you expose PHI in many different ways. It doesn't have to be just through a secure tunnel. So what happens is you're still required to have the same compliance plan as any other company. So that doesn't defend you in most cases, or almost 100% of the cases. You have to have your own effective compliance plan, even though you're bridging off someone's security.
Thanks, Joseph. Okay, I'm going to move forward here because I want to be respectful for everybody's time. This is basic stuff. If you want a copy of this is self-assessment HIPAA compliance checklist, you're welcome to reach out to me by email, and I'll be happy to send you a Word document with this. A lot of folks that I talk to can't answer yes to every single question. And if you can't answer yes to every single question, then there's a problem. And it comes down to, how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to be productive? Do you want to grow your business? Do you want to keep your employees happy? Do you want to develop new lines of revenue? Or do you want to spend your time doing HIPAA compliance?
I'm going thumbs down on that one. Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not going to read these. If you guys want to get a copy of this, I'm happy to send it. I've got more stuff on the checklist as well. So I'm going to do just a little brief pause here and remind everybody that this is a fully managed service. We come in, we work with you, we get you fully compliant. No client that we have ever worked with that has been audited has ever been fined. So if this kind of thing, what you don't know can hurt you, we make sure that you know everything that you need to know. And we guarantee that you're going to pass your HIPAA audits. I guess I already hit the sales pitch. All right. So our job here, again, is to simplify the compliance so your company can focus, so you can focus on building your business. And that's what, yeah, that's funny. I see my little typo here. So your can focus on your business. That's funny. So we manage everything except for spell check and grammar check in your PowerPoint presentations.
Noted.
All right, at this point, I'm going to hand the phone over to somebody significantly more intelligent than me. Tanvir Panjwani is our Chief Technical Officer. He is the smartest human being that I have ever worked with. He's going to brush on some of the higher level concepts that we do and some of the ways that we can help manage your security risk. Tanvir, take it away. I've got access to the presentation, so he's going to say the word slide, and I'm going to turn the slides.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. So now that Steven and Joe have both talked a little bit about compliance around, BAA and securing your networks and procedures and policies, I'm going to talk a little bit about the security side, more so a security risk analysis, a little bit about penetration testing, and the different tools and systems that we use to help safeguard our clients. Steven, slide, please. So and I guess to summarize it, we have 5 steps that you can take to do your security risk analysis. The first step is obviously to map out your PHI. How is your data stored? How is it transmitted? Is it stored on your servers? Where does it originate from? How does it get sent out? Is it done via web interface? Is it done via email? Do you use faxes, USPS? How is all that done? How are you securing that data? Are you using encryption? Are all your computers protected? And then what happens if your systems are unavailable? If your systems go offline, do your folks go there and just take jump drives and kind of passing around? Or do you take pictures with your cell phone and send out multimedia messages to everybody? A lot of that plays into finding out how your patient healthcare information flows throughout your organization. This includes not only computers and servers and laptops and emails, but it also includes filing cabinets and, like I said, mobile devices, jump drives, any type of wireless devices. So all of that kind of comes into this. So you want to map out how your patient healthcare information flows throughout your network, how it's stored, how it's secured, and pretty much what happens when your systems are unavailable. Is somebody, doing something unsecure that is exposing your data. You want to also go in and identify your threats and vulnerabilities. Like I said before, not just only your servers, but let's try to categorize these in a few different areas. So one would be a digital threat, one is a physical threat, you have an internal, external, and I would say, I guess, environmental. So a digital threat would be a weak password, a lockout policy, somebody using unencrypted USB drives, somebody transmitting data on a DVD that's not encrypted. Those would be kind of your digital threats or vulnerabilities. Then you have your physical. And while a lot of folks are now using electronic medical records, you do also have those traditional filing cabinets. And what happens with data what happens with those physical copies? Do you have a lock and key? Do you use key access? Is the data, or once data is transmitted or printed out, is it shredded properly? Another area is your internal, which would be more your employees. Employees, they may not be doing various things maliciously. It could just be a training issue. That's kind of where training comes into the whole picture. But employees would be an internal threat. You may have a disgruntled employee. You may have an employee who's out to get you, and identifying that as a threat is part of the process. External is pretty obvious. That would be your hackers, somebody from the outside trying to get in and get your data and expose everybody's patient healthcare information. And then the last part, which a lot of folks don't think about, is your environmental. For example, flood and hurricanes and tornadoes. So those are all your different areas of vulnerability. And how does it affect your network? What threats does it expose? And then pretty much what the risk is. Now you take these different threats and vulnerabilities, and you can take that and come up with your risk level. Now I've seen a bunch of experts in the industry, what they say is that you want to take the likelihood of something impacting your organization versus the potential impact and kind of average it out, and you would get your HIPAA risk level. So if there is something that is, the likelihood of that risk happening to your environment is low and the impact is somewhat medium, you can kind of average that out to be a low medium. So I guess we use this to say that, to kind of help rank your threats, your risks to your organization, and help put a plan together to kind of address these. And all that comes back together into creating your risk management plan. You know, you have to evaluate your risks. How do you prioritize? What securities do you have in place that address these risks? You always want to address your highest risk levels first. Anything that exposes your data, anything that's the highest risk to your organization that, you know, makes you, I guess, exposes your data, you want to address that first. And then you want to test and verify that everything works the way it should be. You know, you want to make sure that your safeguards are effective. You do want to make sure the securities you put in place work the way that it's supposed to. And the key that Steven has touched on earlier is everything must be documented. You have to keep a paper trail. You have to say, this is a security control that I have in place for this threat. This is when I tested it. This is how effective it is. And this is what to do differently, or this is what I'm going to do differently to kind of address it better. So these are just 5 steps to kind of putting together your risk management plan, or to assessing the risk to your organization.
Tianveer, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Great. This is Russell. From the perspective of the evaluator, take like a payer, a health insurance plan, maybe a large employer or provider, do they look at all vendors? Do they hold all vendors to the same standard? Or do they assess, given the level of PHI or the type of PHI, the standards are different depending on the sensitivity of the information that a vendor may be holding? And as such, the evaluation is done differently. Does that make sense?
Right. So, yeah. So, I mean, that may be a question for Joe to address, but I'll just talk about what I've seen in my experience. Is that I know that there's a client that we work with that does deal with patient healthcare data. And they are not a doctor's office. They don't hold any of that sensitive information. However, they are still, and they provide a product, but they work in the healthcare space. And they are being classified in the same category as a doctor's office. So they're being held to the same standard as some of these others. And that's what
that's correct. That's correct, Tianveer. Sorry, I just want to jump in and let you guys know. Yeah, so really the business associate covered entities, those 2 different types of practices that need to be compliant, whether you're directly dealing with PHI or you're the vendor of that community, it's the same, believe it or not, it's the same requirement for everybody. But to your point before, if we go back to the point about the cleaning crew, depending on really what their exposure to PHI is, it could be more, even though we call it a BAA, it could be more of an agreement that they sign, not that they won't disclose any information or anything like that, so less stringent. But if you're a true business associate, yes, they're going to look at everybody the same exact way. It doesn't matter how large or small, it's going to be pretty much the same, in the same light.
Okay.
I want to
hello.
Here.
I'm sorry. I wanted to jump in also. I just wanted to say that I don't think there's a definition for the level of PHI. There either is PHI or there isn't. And I heard that earlier. And so the ability to secure a device or mechanism in relationship to PHI needs all the scrutiny if it's 1 member or if it's 1 million members. So I don't think there's a level of PHI is my point. There either is PHI or there isn't.
Yes, I'll agree with that too. What we see, is if my name is is hacked and it's only my name, that's just as damaging as if it's my name and the entire list of every medication that I've ever used in my entire life.
Hi,
I do want to.
this is Patrick speaking here. So one last question on this topic. Could you touch briefly upon what the implications are of anonymization for PHI? So if we can find a way to remove all those identifiers, does that bypass the requirement for these kind of security? How are you thinking about that kind of thing?
That's a question for Joe. We've just started scratching the surface on that.
So if you eliminate the actual, so the question is if you actually take out the indicators that indicate PII or PHI, would you be exempt from becoming compliant or needing to be? Is that the question?
Yeah, if we can successfully take out all the personal aspects of the HI, if you like, so all things which qualify as being the personal data, how do you think about that in this context?
If you're not exposed to what is considered the true definition, you can look it up, a PII and PHI, but the problem is PHI and PII, they're going to come into more of generalized things than you think, and because you fit a certain sector and what you're doing, say, in market for your business, since you're already put in that category, you're going to have a harder time coming out of it because, let's say, name or email address or anything else, that could be considered PHI or PII because you're in, let's say, healthcare. It's going to be where somebody who's not in healthcare, they can be exposed to a name or an email address, but because of what you do is going to determine that you would pretty much have to strip all of the indicators, which is very hard to do based on the definitions. But if you could do it, then if you're not exposed to it, then you don't have to comply. But those indicators are going to be stuff like email address, names, and stuff that you would probably have access to anyway.
Okay, so in a special case where we were working with a third party who themselves had the personal information but passed to us just anonymized identifiers linked to the health information, we may be able to avoid the need to be compliant ourselves in that case if it could be truly anonymized at the point of passage.
Correct. If you were able to take out everything, then I would say yes, and then definitely you don't have exposure to. But just the exposure to is different for somebody like you compared to somebody who's a manufacturing company outside of medical. They might have access to PII, but they don't have to be compliant because of where they fit, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you.
I do want to jump in on one other point around what Tanvir was sharing earlier. It's in regards to people. We have a client who's recently gone through a situation where they did have a malicious employee, and that employee was deleting files and taking photographs of files and all of those things. And so having behavioral analysis, noticing what people are doing, when they're doing it, how they're doing it, is extremely important for this. And this is stuff that should be covered in the quarterly trainings and the quarterly security trainings about how people are putting themselves at risk as well as the company at risk if they're doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. Tanvir, you ready for me to roll over to the next slide?
Hi, this is Kyler. Actually, touching a good point, I was kind of trying to raise that. One of the questions that I was thinking about is that, like, for example, what you said was like malicious employees or personnel could be from an outsider, from outside the organization. And think about, like, is there an active or what is the best practice around protecting data integrity, for example, from tampering as well as phishing attacks that could impersonate employees other than just kind of the passive or more like a proxy measure on doing behavior analysis? Is there a specific way that you can actually have an audit trail where you can look back on what has been done to the data and something out of ordinary, you can have a way of like pinpointing, what action to take, etc.?
That's a great question. The answer to that is yes, you can find ways to do that. In fact, it's required. So if somebody checks in a record, they need to check out the record, et cetera, with that. We like proxy servers, we use services. There's a company called Iron Scales that we use, which is an anti-phishing company. We use Symantec that filters attachment-based email attacks. There's a number of different tools that we can bring in. Tanvir, do you have further thoughts on that particular question?
No, I think you covered it. Actually, the next slide does cover some of the systems that we use to help protect our clients. And if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and jump into this, and then we can take questions around this afterwards. But what I've done here is in this slide, types of platforms and services that we use with a lot of our clients. I've only listed 3 in each category, but it kind of paints the picture. So we broke it down into security appliances. So security appliances are firewalls or gateways that would protect your network. They would protect outside attacks from coming into your network. You know, we like WatchGuard, we use SonicWall, we like Cisco, we like SonicWall too. Fortinet we've used, and there's a couple of home-graded devices that we've used before to help secure our clients' networks. However, we recommend some of these firewalls or some of these systems that have built-in security subscriptions that let you protect your environment against some of these types of attacks, and also helps keep an audit trail of some of the records. For example, the WatchGuard system, the WatchGuard firewall, and SonicWall has something that compares to it as well. They have intrusion prevention, which prevents outsiders from sending a lot of traffic to your network if they're an unknown source, and eventually it ends up blocking their data. So that way they can't break in. So someone's scanning your network, it'll detect it and block it. The other nice thing about these WatchGuard and SonicWall type platforms is they have built-in sensors, one that's built around HIPAA, one that's built around PCI, and other different compliance groups. And what it does is it scans your web traffic, it scans your email traffic on the way in and out of the network, and looks for certain patterns of data in that traffic. And based on that, we'll either block it or log it for you to come back to a centralized reporting interface to pull that data again. So I can go into, and I'll use WatchGuard because we just recently deployed this and it's really fresh in my mind. WatchGuard has something called the WatchGuard Dimension platform, and you can log in as an administrator into that platform and click on the HIPAA sensor and see that, okay, these following users in my organization have violated my HIPAA policy. They tried to send this out, they tried to send that out, and it was logged on this day at this time. And the attack was essentially either blocked or just logged. So all of these firewalls have these built-in safeguards now that will help protect your network. Along with protecting your network from the firewall side, from the security side, there's also the encryption side, which Steven has talked about and a lot of other folks have talked about. There's a lot of different encryption platforms out there that will protect the actual data itself. Now we're just talking about digital data itself. So in a lot of these documents, a lot of these audits that you fill out, they always ask the question, is your data encrypted? You know, what level of encryption do you use? Is your data encrypted at rest and in transmit? So all of these different platforms that we use help do that for your environment. So Azure Information Protection Systems is one of the ones that we've recently started deploying for a lot of our clients. And what it does, it uses Azure's cloud infrastructure to help encrypt your document. You can encrypt it based on your digital ID or your email ID with Microsoft Azure, and that data is encrypted. You can set certain security policies where I set it so my regular users cannot print, they cannot email, they cannot move the file, and they cannot do other various tasks. Whereas, you know, some of my folks in a different group who need to be able to do some of these tasks can do it. And the nice thing about a Microsoft Azure platform is it integrates right into the Microsoft Office suites. They have native integration with Adobe Reader, and also third parties that integrate into it. Symantec provides very similar type security at the desktop level, where you can encrypt files from your desktop. It sits inside of your email. It integrates with your email services, and it scans for certain patterns, similar to how the WatchGuard does on your traffic on the way in and out. It scans your emails on the way in and out to look for anything that would be related to patient healthcare information. And based on that, it will either reject, log, or forward it to somebody else. Now, if it does see patient healthcare information, your policy say, okay, allow it out, but make sure you encrypt it, then what would happen is your end users or your recipients would get a secure link to a portal where they would download an encrypted document that's password protected that gets sent in a separate email where they could obtain these documents. While Microsoft Windows, sure.
Can I ask a question on that? So our problem is maybe a little bit the opposite, where we get EPHI being sent to us for support through email, even though we tell our customers, don't send us anything like that. Many of them do anyway. How do we protect ourselves against that?
So one is to make sure that you're using an encrypted form of transport. And the other way would be to use a system like Symantec, which would sit there and scan all the emails that come in and out and make sure that and then check for certain patterns. Now, if they do send you something and Symantec does flag it as, hey, this data has patient healthcare information, it would send them a rejection notice saying, hey, this violates our internal email policy. You could do it, you could do it that way, or like I said, you can use strong encryption and just tell them don't do that anymore.
We tell them don't do that. They're not going to set up encryption, but the semantic, I think, is an interesting solution.
Yep. Yeah. Symantec has a product called it's called Email Safeguard.cloud, and it works with Office 365. It works with on-premise Exchange systems, and it works with a lot of other third-party mail software. And you pretty much redirect your mail to go through their gateway first. And what it does, it just scans for certain patterns and kicks back the messages if they violate certain security policies. And it logs it, and it logs all that information so you can print out a report and say, okay, this is when they tried to do it, even though we told them not to, and it got rejected. Okay, so with the Microsoft Suite, with the Windows Server, I know I'm running out of time here. With the server infrastructure, or with the Microsoft Server infrastructure, there's a lot of different things you can do to lock down your network. You can enforce encryption on file transfers. You can encrypt your shared folders. You can set certain passwords. You can set passwords they're stored in non-reversible encryption. So a lot of that is there inside of the Windows framework. However, Microsoft also has with Windows 10 and certain versions of Windows 7, they have BitLocker encryption, where you can encrypt your physical hard drives on these workstations and laptops. So in the event that a piece of hardware is stolen or just goes missing or somebody gets their hands on it, even as an IT person, I can take a drive and plug it into the back of my computer. Even though I don't have the password, I can probably extract that data. However, if it's protected with BitLocker or some of the other platforms out there, I will not be able to unlock that drive and pull the data off of it. So Microsoft, we've been using BitLocker a lot with our clients who have mobile devices that are always concerned about these devices being, stolen. And so there's different technologies out there to encrypt your data, whether it's from on-premise storage to email services to your physical hardware, or to the actual hardware side. So there's different, different suites of solutions out there that we can help implement to kind of protect you. And I'm going to talk about the other two really quickly, and then I'll hopefully be done with my portion. One of the items that keep coming up in these audits now is dual factor authentication. So there's different ways to do it. Some of the platforms that we've implemented are, one is called Duo, which just recently got acquired by Cisco, and it's a push style notification on your phone. You install an app on your phone. When you try to VPN in, it integrates with Duo. And when I punch in my password, it just sits there and spins. It's verifying identity, and it'll pop up on my phone and say, do you wish to allow or deny this? So you have two factors of authentication there. And if you hit deny, it just drops the connection. It'll try it again. You can deny it again, and you can block it. So that worked out really well for clients who don't want to invest in the physical hardware tokens, and they want to use some of the newer technology out there. So we've had a great success with Duo. And then the traditional solutions out there are by HID, which are your smart cards. It's kind of like a credit card you pop into a computer, and it verifies your identity. The idea there is it requires you to protect your card or your login with a PIN. So you have two forms of authentication there, something you have, which is your card, something you know, which is your PIN, and it provides you your two layers of authentication there. You can also use it they have all these great APIs that kind of link into all these third-party applications, and you can use smart cards for VPN or different applications. So that also has a place there as well. And then you have your traditional physical hardware tokens that you used to see everybody carry around on their keychain. And when I want to VPN in, I look at the random code that's on there, I punch it in, and I have my two-factor authentication. So we've seen more and more audits require or request that information. And the last part of this is your vulnerability assessment. And we have a few different platforms that we use. We use Rapid Tools, Qualsys, and OpenVAS. That's just some of the ones that we use. And they all pretty much do very similar tasks. You provide them with your information, your network IP addresses. They scan for vulnerabilities, scan for weaknesses, and provide that information. Steven, will you flip the slide, please? This is kind of the sample output that you would see. You could see that, my network has vulnerabilities, kind of ranks them for you as high. Depending on the system, some will kind of rank it with colors or tags such as critical, warning, info, and some will actually give you a scale. So the one on the right gives you a scale from 1 to 10. And you can use these vulnerability scans and put together and add them into and kind of identify which areas need attention and put all that into your documentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Super helpful.
All right, Steven, I'm going to hand it back to you.
All right. One thing I do want to jump in on with this, and I want to be sensitive about time, is that as you're doing these penetration tests, as you're doing these vulnerability scans, you document each step of the way. So, you know, this is where we were initially. So then to take the example here on the left, okay, we updated our cipher. All right, cool. You document that step. Okay, then we've got to do this vulnerability of the beast. All right, cool. We applied the fix for that. We document that. We reprint the scan. We attach that to the documentation, and it shows this incremental process that HIPAA compliance is to wrapping up your successful HIPAA IT audits. All right. So, what questions do we have right now?
With 2 minutes.
With 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Kim Hansen. With regards to vulnerability penetration testing, how important is adding a manual penetration test? We have would like that, and we say, that's expensive. But that said, how important is it to be able to show manual penetration testing? And is there kind of a level that you recommend?
It is important to have a real human being attempt a penetration test. That real human being is going to be using tools like what we showed you here in the previous slide. We employ white hat hackers to attempt to gain access to people's networks. It's important. If you say yes, I'm compliant, but you've never actually had somebody attempt to hack you, I would anticipate that there would be a problem as a result of that.
Another question.
Okay.
How do you price your services?
There's different tiers. Different size organizations have different pricing, different complexity, et cetera, But as I was saying before, it's a fraction of what you would pay to have a chief security officer, or even honestly, to bring in a managed services firm to manage your whole organization of this nature. It depends what exactly you're looking for. If you're looking for us to just manage HIPAA, that's one certain price level. If you're looking for us to modify your network in order to meet those requirements, then there's charges that come along there. And then, of course, if you want us to manage the entirety of your network, not just from a HIPAA perspective, but from an operational and security and where you're in mission vision CIO, where you're trying to get to, that's also an additional level. I'd be happy to follow up with you directly, and we can talk a little bit more about what you're looking for.
Awesome. And guys, I hate to do this because I think we could continue. I want to thank Steven and Tanvir and Joe for some awesome information today. Thank you. Excellent and informative and insightful. I also shared that I would choose one participant on the call to have a one-on-one finance strategy consultation, and I want to extend that invitation to Craig Scott at Capture MD. So Craig, I will follow up with you. And the reason that I invited CommonGood on today is because I believe that IT compliance plus back office, accounting compliance, and HR compliance together gives companies the best chance possible of focusing on their genius zone, which is looking ahead and driving growth and building product, knowing that your back end is secure so you can move with confidence in driving the impact that you want. So thank you all so much. We have some other virtual office hours coming up in a couple of weeks. The Cures Act just came out with some new language that is very, very telling for those of us that are integrating into other data sources and reducing the obstacles for patient data that historically has been hard to capture. So I have David Schoolcraft from Ogden Murphy Wallace, a law firm that's going to be on to talk about some of the actionable opportunities for digital health companies as it relates to the Cures Act. Everybody, thank you so much. Wonderful to have you. This will be online in the next couple of days. We recorded this. I will keep you all informed. If you want to get a hold of Steven directly and you don't have his information, what you do right there, you can always email me. I will get it to you. Super fun. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate your time and attention today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Wonderful. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.